information is not knowledge, and knowledge is what leads to wisdom. So I think we live in a space where, because the answers, quote unquote, because the answers are so readily available, we don't have to go on the journey to find them. But when you decide to go on the journey, you discover that the whole pathway is just inundated with mystery that you cannot know until you go down that road.
So for me, I feel like reconnecting to mystery, reconnecting to the land we live on, reconnecting to just understanding that magic is freaking everywhere. It's just there. We can access it all the time. We don't have to be in sacred space, exactly like you're saying. That is one of the things that's going to heal our culture.
So you just heard the voices of our interviewees for episode 37, Gwion Raven and Phoenix LaFae.
Stay tuned to hear our interview and hear more from these ritualists, witchy store owners, leaders in the communities, and teachers.
Welcome to the Witchy Wit podcast, where we look at life through a witchy lens. I'm Kimberlyn.
I'm Leilani.
At Witchy Wit, we explore current events,
ideas,
music and books,
and experiences in ways that recognize energy and life in everybody and everything.
We are both real witches.
And we bring two real perspectives through the lens of our different ages,
races,
and backgrounds.
With a healthy skepticism for what we have been told is true, our conversations are raw, candid, and vulnerable.
Join us as we cast a spell to uncover what we each know is true in our intuitive, witchy selves.
So, why don't I start our check-in? Okay, this is going to be a little bit of a rant. I was just reading, The Daughter of Martin Luther King, and taking a step back. So Prince William of England, of the United Kingdom, made a comment about how, distressing the war in Ukraine is and how war is so alien to Europe. And there were other things that he was misquoted by AP, and she responded to that. But then they dialed it back a little bit, and I think she took off her tweet or her Twitter whatever. That thing that you do on Twitter. And but this is just, to me, yet another example of I'm just going to say the royal family. I'm not going to talk about white people, but the royal family, just being so blinded to the effects of England on the colonization of England of so many countries in Africa and Asia, and the Caribbean, and the United States. So we kicked them out, and how they can be so blinkered, and just because now they've totally lost all of their empire, they just forget, or they just conveniently not remember the fact that there are so many former colonies that are still struggling from the after effects of their oppression. And I just, so taking another step back. So this is a rant, but understanding that the royal family basically exists to keep us busy so that we don't recognize all the other crap that's going on in the world. And my focusing on that is just kind of highlighting that I do want to, I think it's kind of symptomatic of a lot of other thinking, where just because you are no longer in that country, you don't recognize how much you've raped and stolen from these places. And I don't know if I expect them to actually acknowledge it or not, but I just think that, this idea that Europe is so civilized and all of these other places are, they're just hotbeds of violence. I'm not going to argue with the fact that, yeah, there's a lot of violence going on in these places. But what I find so difficult to accept is the fact that they just don't acknowledge their contribution to that. I thought I'd feel better. I don't actually, but I'm glad I shared, because I've been kind of bottling it up. So
for sure. Mm-hmm. All I want to say I want to say a lot, but to acknowledge what you shared, I just want to say may we acknowledge, may we create a world where we can acknowledge so mote it be.
So mote it be.
For sure.
So mote it be. Thank you.
Can I take us in a bit of a different direction?
Please,
okay.
Please do.
Because I'm vibing with you on that. For sure. But just for the purposes of the podcast, may I take us we can talk more later.
Okay, just drag us back up. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
So I have a celebration.
Yes.
Okay, so here's my celebration. So I'm a partner acrobat, and I also do hand balancing in support of my partner acrobatics. And it's 3 years in the making, and I finally reached the milestone, which for hand balancers, like it's a pretty like if you're in the hand balancing community, this is a well-known milestone. So I reached the milestone of having my first 1 minute freestanding full position. That means like my legs are together, handstand.
I know. I saw it on Instagram or Facebook or something.
I posted on social media.
Oh my gosh, it was just glorious. I just sat there for a minute. I literally just sat there, and your toes were pointed, and I mean, you had really good form, and I mean, it was just beautiful to behold. And
Thank you.
Because I don't know from personal experience. I just know from talking with you what that represents. And
Thank you.
I
mean, you do know a little bit from personal experience because. You did that handstand against the wall. That wasn't even too long ago.
Yes, I did. Well, but I did. I used to. Oh God, 40 years ago, I used to do gymnastics.
So there you go.
Even more. But I mean, it's just I think it's just wondrous, and I think it just represents a great deal of work and effort, and it's beautiful. It's one of those things where people may not understand or recognize, like, you're like the duck, the swan, going across the water, but meanwhile underneath it. So all of the effort that goes into just staying there, just sticking that for a minute.
Thank you.
You should be so proud. It's beautiful to behold.
I am so proud. I have so much more to work on, even just in my freestanding handstand for 1 minute. Like, I have a lot to clean up, but it feels so great in a hobby or in a passion where there is so much to do. These milestones are rare, and so I just want to really eat it up.
And celebrate it.
Delicious.
Yay!
So thank you for letting me kind of do 180 and celebrate that.
we need balance. So I was one end of the spectrum, and you kind of pulled us back into the other end. So no, thank you very much, and thank you very much for demonstrating the beauty and grace of that handstand.
Thank you. Maybe we'll find some more balance as we pull in our fabulous interview with the witches next door.
Yes, indeed. Welcome, everyone. We are so jazzed because we are going to be interviewing some longstanding friends, colleagues in the craft, and just all around wonderful people. And they also have their own podcast. So we'll put in a little plug for them before the episode is over. But welcome to Phoenix and Gwion. And we're going to start by just introducing them.
Phoenix LaFae is equal parts blue-eyed wanderer and passionate devotee to the goddess. She is a restless seeker of knowledge, always yearning to learn more, dig deeper, and dive into mystery. Phoenix suffers from the whims of her divine muse, or perhaps muses, and in the suffering experiences a joy that manifests in writing, ritual, teaching, and devotion. An initiate in reclaiming the Avalon Druid Order, the Gardnerian Wicca, Phoenix has had the pleasure of teaching and leading ritual globally. She is a hoodoo practitioner, a professional witch, and a published author, and the owner of the Goddess Shop Milk and Honey. Welcome, Phoenix.
Welcome, Phoenix.
You do a lot.
She does. She manages to
breathe.
and she manages also to come on the podcast. And so I'd like to introduce Gwion Raven, who is a tattooed pagan, writer, traveler, musician, cook, kitchen witch, occult shop owner, and teacher. Although initiated in 3 magical traditions, Gwion describes his practice as virtually anything that celebrates the wild, sensuous, living, breathing, dancing, ecstatic, divine experiences of this lifetime. Born and raised in London, England, he now resides in Northern California and shares space with redwood trees, the Pacific Ocean, and his beloved partner. Welcome, Gwion Raven.
Hello.
Hail and welcome.
I know it feels ritualistic, like hail and welcome, Phoenix and Gwion.
We have been invoked into the podcast.
Nice.
Well, again, we're going to start out. We have so many things that we want to know about you, and we want to know, and that we want our listeners to know. But feel free, as we said earlier, to just tell us what you think we should know too. So I'm going to get us started. I'm going to ask you both to just take turns in maybe briefly describing yourself and your practice. We introduced you, but using your own words, how would you describe yourself and your practice?
All right, Phoenix is pointing to me. Yeah, you know what? It's very interesting because I think practices, they're called practices, not perfections. So they change, right? Like I don't do the same thing all the time, but there are themes to what I do. And as a witch and generally as a pagan, I think for me, it really is about being present. Now, if you look at all the great religions in the world, if you look at all the great philosophies in the world, nearly all of them talk about being present. I think that's the thing that defines my craft for me more than anything is in the moment. What do I smell? What do I taste? What can I touch? How does it impact me? And to live in that space. I think that's really, the more present I am, the more engaged I am with myself, with the people around me, with the world. And the less prone I am personally to some of the ravages of worry and depression and, some of those other things that can take hold of us. So, yeah, I think that's my practice, being in as much as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah, Phoenix is looking at me like, that's not your practice.
Nah.
What about you, Phoenix?
It like Gwion was saying, I think it changes a lot. And obviously the last 2 years with COVID and all of the shifts and changes of being in community the last little bit have really changed my practice, where I think before the last 2 years, I was a lot more outwardly focused. And so planning public ritual and classes and whatnot kind of kept me in a certain practice. And so I've really turned more inward the last 2 years and have to find the ways of finding that piece. For me, a huge part of it is being connected to spirit of place, to where I am, to we moved in the middle of the pandemic. Whoa. We lived in the one house for 15 years, and now we're in a different town and a different climate and a different everything. So it's been amazing to have that developing new relationship to focus on and nurture, learning the little corner of land that we live on and the neighborhood we're in, and developing relationship with the spirits that are here. That's a big part of my personal practice. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's we'll get into your books and all of these ways in which you kind of share this information, but I just loved watching your faces as you described, being present, and it's kind of a model for us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to share.
Yeah.
I would love to hear.
I'm sorry. Okay. I have a question for Phoenix. I know this is your show, so I just apologize in advance for taking over.
This is what happens on your podcast. It's fine.
Okay. Why did you look at me when I was talking about my practice and be like...
Because I was listening to you.
Were you?
Yeah.
It felt judgy.
No, I was just listening. I was just smitten and fascinated by you.
Oh, there you go.
Well, she was taking the picture that she has in her head and listening to your words and then putting them together and seeing what a brilliant package you are.
Exactly.
There you go.
Exactly.
That's what we saw over here on this end. I know.
Yeah, totally.
All right.
So I'm really curious to ask this question about how do you navigate, or do you navigate a difference between a witchy and a mundane life? Because I know you guys own the store, you have your podcast, your authors, your priestesses in the community. So I'm just curious, do you feel like there is a negotiation there?
I think it's different for each of us, because for me, there isn't. Like it's 24/7 I'm Phoenix all the time. When I'm in the shop, when I'm doing spreadsheets for the business, that's always part. Thankfully, I'm blessed that I don't have to kind of like wear different hats or compartmentalize anything. But I think it's different for Gwion because he does have like a mundane persona.
No, I don't. Yeah. How do I negotiate it? So here's the lovely thing. In 95% of my world, like I don't know how many people I know, but if you counted like actual people I know and then like Facebook people that, have friended me or Instagram followers or, like the universe of people that know me or that I know, in probably 95% of that world, I'm just me. I'm just Gwion, right? And for good or for bad, people get to interact with me the way I am. There is a segment of my life. I'm a business consultant, right? So I have been for 15 years. And it's interesting because I don't normally walk into a new client and go, hello, I'm Gwion Raven, witch at large. Let's fix your business, right? That's not typically how my presentations go. But it's interesting. So at the day job I'm working at right now, I've noticed, because I've been working with these people for a year, they'll say things like, because I've introduced this, they'll say things like, okay, so we're releasing this new product. If we could wave a magic wand, how would we do that? Right? All these little phrases that they say, and they're like, so Gwion's going to do his magic. Like, I totally have like witched these clients. Like I do it all the time. So it's interesting. Like the name they call me is different. But the way I approach it, I mean, a business meeting is no different than a witch's coven meeting, really, right? You've got a group of people that are all coming together in theory for a common purpose. And we start off, like I do an invocation. Let's be kind with each other. Let's bring our best selves. Let's think about the project that we are working on and what we want the end result to be. That's just magic wrapped up in business terms, right? So I run my life magically. And in most places, there's not much of a separation. There really isn't.
That's wondrous. I mean, and it kind of harkens back to your saying being present, because you're bringing all of you there, and whether or not you lead with that, people get that.
Yeah,
that's great. It's so impressive hearing you talk about your practice and living your practice. And I guess my question is, how long? No, when did you first realize that you were, or a kind of incipient kind of form of yourself? When did you first know that you were a witch or a priestess or
yeah, go on.
So for me, I was not raised religious in any formal religious system. We didn't go to church or anything like that. So I didn't have that kind of background. And then when I was 15, my heart was broken for the first time. I was devastated. I was probably clinically depressed, to be totally honest. But I thought, if I had religion, maybe this wouldn't be so hard. So I started exploring. There was a Catholic church across the street. I would go to mass. I read books about all different kinds of religions. And this was in the early 90s, mid 90s. So there was like a little peak of Wicca at that point, and I stumbled into it was probably a Walden books. And I found a book about
Walden's.
Exactly. And I was reading this book and it was talking about the goddess and the earth. And I was like, this is all the stuff that I already believe. I didn't realize it had a name and there were other people practicing and that there was formal ritual. And that was it. I was hooked. I started reading everything I could. And luckily for me, there was a pretty thriving local reclaiming community who was doing public ritual. So at 17, I went to my first public ritual and I was like, holy crap, I'd been reading rituals in books and performing them in my bedroom. And then I went to a ritual with 60 other people where they were singing and chanting and a spiral dance. And I was like, is this what it's supposed to be like? Because it's not this cool in my bedroom. And that was it. That was it. It's been my path ever since. And, you know, I've dabbled in different traditions and systems, but that was it. It was my broken heart that led me to witchcraft.
And feel free to, if you don't, if this is not something you want to answer, but how did like the people around you handle this change in terms of, your spiritual direction?
Yeah. So for the most part, people were pretty accepting. We live in a very progressive part of Northern California, and I grew up here. My dad thought it was really cool. My mom was a little bit it was the tarot cards that freaked her out. Everything else was okay. It was the tarot cards. But once I was reading, it was probably like a Silver Ravenwolf book. I don't remember what book it was, but it was probably Silver Ravenwolf in a science class my junior year. And my science teacher walked by and he was like, "That's dangerous. That's the devil's work. You're going to go to hell." And that was the first time I'd ever had something like that. I had no relationship with hell or any of that. I wasn't afraid of any of that because I didn't have that religion training, so I was like, okay.
I need to let me know when I'm there.
That was it. Like that, I can't even think of another time I've had pushback in that way. I live in a very progressive area, so I'm lucky. I've even worked in different corporate environments where, I call myself a witch now because that's how I identify. But in the past, I would say Wiccan because it's kind of softer. And I would have I remember I worked for a corporation and my manager was like, "Are you Wiccan?" And I was like, "I am." And it was just okay. So I'm lucky in that regard. And I know how lucky I am in that regard.
It's so wonderful for me to hear someone who found it so young. And that's amazing. Thank you. What about you, Gwion?
Oh, mine's a long, circuitous journey. Could take an entire podcast, but the short version, let me tell you, I'll tell you the bit of the journey that I love the most.
Okay.
So, in a billion years ago, in my late 20s, I went into a liquor store in Sausalito, California. Yeah, see, I told you it's a long story. So
there's a joke in there somewhere, but
because at the time I was working in the wine and beer and liquor distribution industry, right? So I went in to this liquor store, and there was the owner of the shop was from India, and I was in his back office, and there was a calendar on the wall, and on the calendar it was various scenes from Hindu mythology, right? So there was one, and I'm like, "Who's that blue god?" Like, that's really, my whole life I've grown up. So I grew up in England. So there's massive Indian and Pakistani populations where I grew up. And it's like, I've seen this god my whole life. Who's this god? Tell me the story. So he tells me the story of what this is. And then he tells me that which book this story is in, the Bhagavad Gita, right? So I'm like, all right. So I immediately leave my job that I was supposed to be doing, drove to the Marin Library, found a copy of this book and started reading, and my entire world changed. And within a few months, I started practicing Buddhism. Then I ended up working with a Tibetan Rinpoche for many, many years. And then I was at an event with His Holiness Dalai Lama and my Rinpoche. And the Dalai Lama said, and he did not say this to me, he said it to, 1,000 people. I was there. I got the message.
You were like,
but he wasn't like, "Yo, Gwion," that's, So, but the Dalai Lama says, essentially, he said, go find your, he used the word native. He said, go find your native religion. Go find the philosophies from where you are, because we're not recruiting in Buddhism. And the stories from Tibet, 800 years ago are wonderful, but there's so much cultural context in them that people coming to this tradition might not get that context, right? And so about a month later, I found myself in England with Phoenix, and we ended up, wicked cliched, I know, we ended up on top of Glastonbury Tor, Phoenix, there was nobody else up there. Phoenix literally like puts her hands out and calls down the mists. And I'll be fucked if the mists didn't like start raising up over the Vale of Avalon. Then these ravens came by, hence my last name. They came swimming by, and I, in a moment that I can only describe as sublime bliss, I sort of closed my eyes and I took off with the ravens, and I went flying all over Glastonbury. And after, I don't know, could have been 5 seconds or 5 hours for all I know, I kind of landed back in my body and went, that's it, I'm a witch. Pretty much that's where the journey started. So I dabbled in druidry for several years after that. And then, yeah.
What he's not saying is who took him to his first witchcraft ritual. That's me, this guy. I took him to his first witchcraft ritual.
That would be you.
And I'll tell you just one brief story about that. So it happened to be in the reclaiming tradition. There were about 100 people there. It was a Samhain ritual. And there were a couple of priestesses there who are now dear, dear friends of mine. But in the moment, they scared the piss out of me. One of them was bare-breasted, had long black hair down to her knees, it seemed like, and was just like invoking things. And then there was this amazing person who is an amazing singer and musician, and she had on like huge ram horns and was singing, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. And people were spinning around and gyrating and dancing and toning, raising cones of power. And we walk outside and my eyes were like as big as dinner plates, you know. And Phoenix says to me, she goes, well, what do you think? And what I said was, I have no idea what happened, but I know I want more of it. So that was that.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know, when you were saying about the people gyrate, I think of you with the drum, right? And when you're raising energy literally on the drum. So it's like you found your space.
I did. Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I can imagine like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah. Yeah, it was great.
I don't know, but I want some of it. So we've read some of their books. So you want to start with that?
Absolutely. This is my favorite one. It's Life Ritualized. For no other reason, it's my favorite than like I really enjoy books that offer peeks inside of other people's practices on what they recommend. But the concept I really wanted to ask y'all about, because it really stuck out to me, is the concept of mystery blindness. I like the way you're both looking at each other, nodding, like, yeah. And it spoke to me because I feel like, so I lead a pretty like mundane, separated, witchy life, because I work in public schools during the day, and then so I have different names. You know, like I'm Miss Long during the day, and then I have my magical name for whenever I'm not there. So it feels very separated. And one of the things that I'm constantly coming back to is this idea of I want to bring the sacred with me all the time, even if I'm not in like air quotes sacred space.
Yeah.
So whenever I read the concept that y'all wrote about of mystery blindness, it just really spoke to me. And I was wondering if you could share that and how you kind of landed upon that.
One of my biggest issues, beliefs, things, I don't know how to phrase it, is that like the main problem with especially American culture, but I think this is true of a lot of the Western world, but a lot of mainly Americans, is we are completely disconnected from mystery, and our culture makes no space for it. We live on stolen land. We live lives where we don't know our heritage. We don't know our ancestry. We don't know the mystery traditions of our cultures, because we are in this amazing, beautiful melting pot, right? That's a great thing. But the problem is we're completely disconnected. And I think that is one of the issues with the illness, the sickness, the disease of American culture. So for me, I feel like reconnecting to mystery, reconnecting to the land we live on, reconnecting to just understanding that magic is freaking everywhere. It's just there. We can access it all the time. We don't have to be in sacred space, exactly like you're saying. that is one of the things that's going to heal our culture. I don't know that it's going to happen. I think, we witches are still like a niche. We're a little tiny group, but it's getting bigger. And I think people are starting to wake up to these things and understanding, like, the issue with climate change. It's because we have no relationship to the land. We don't respect it. We don't caretake it. If you love something, you're not going to let it be abused, So for me, that's what it's all about. Like, that's the biggest part of my practice and how I teach and how I approach magic and witchcraft in general, is that reconnection to mystery, because it's not hard. It's everywhere. We just have to pay attention to it. And that alone will revolutionize our lives. Yeah. I can get a little soapboxy.
No. And one of the things is like you said, that it might be difficult to change because we're in a little niche, but I'm convinced, this is just me, but I'm convinced that, this is the vineyard that we're working in, but other people, Buddhists meditating, the starseed people, we're all kind of in our own way contributing to people, like, finally maybe waking up just a little bit, just enough to kind of see where we are, to be a little bit more present and recognize what's around us. So thank you.
So mystery blindness for me. So we live in, generally speaking, what's known as the information age. We do this all the time. I'm sure most people do these days. We might be watching something on TV, Netflix, Hulu, whatever it is that we're watching at the moment, right? And we'll see an actor, and we'll both be like, who is that? We know that person from somewhere. And we can stop the screen immediately and grab our phones, and we can look up, cast members of such and such a show, right? And all of a sudden we can go down that rabbit hole. So we have unlimited access to information in our hands. But information is not knowledge, and knowledge is what leads to wisdom. So I think we live in a space where, because the answers, quote unquote, because the answers are so readily available, we don't have to go on the journey to find them. But when you decide to go on the journey, you discover that the whole pathway is just inundated with mystery that you cannot know until you go down that road. And so I think for me, that's mystery blindness, because we so readily understand how to get from here to there, how to navigate information, how to get answers quickly, that we don't actually spend time going on the journey. I will tell you, there's a park that I walk in very regularly. And I've gone there so much now that I can tell you when the wild radishes and the garlic and the spring flowers are going to come up. Like, I can tell what's going to happen on a particular tree when it's going to go into bud. Not because I'm a brilliant gardener or botanist, because I am not, but because I sit with the place. Like, I know that tomorrow morning, if I get up and go for a walk, because of the time of year it is, I know there'll be rabbits, and I know exactly where those rabbits will be, and I know what they like to eat. And the only way I could learn that information was to walk down that path every single day for a year and discover what was there and what wasn't. So that's the thing.
It's really the thing.
So I took the Life Ritualized as a call to awakening from mystery blindness, like waking up to the mystery that is all around. And then one of the tools to that I took from the book was rites of passages. And I was curious, do you feel like, did rites of passage call to, like, it felt like chicken or egg to me. Like, did rites of passage, did that call to you? And then in your work with that, it helped you see like what you were being called to, or what were you called? And then you discovered the rites of passages. Like, how did that work for y'all?
It's a really good question. It is very much chicken or egg. Like, we decided to write this book. Like, I can totally see where we were. We were driving in the car. We were going past Sonoma State University, like on the way home. And we were talking about rites of passages and how important they are to, like, the witchcraft traditions, but also how they're so lacking in our like culture and our mundane lives, and yet we go through them. We just don't necessarily give them the brevity that they deserve. And so we were just having like this esoteric conversation, and we were like, we should write a book about this. And so I don't know that there was a one thing or the other. They kind of were like simultaneous almost, like you can't have one without the other. Mm-hmm. That answers the question. That's a really good question.
Yeah, I know for me, so I moved to the US, and I remember very clearly when I left England, I was one person. Mm. And when I landed in the United States, I became a completely different person. Mm. Right. I went from being someone that was comfortable in my place. I was, surrounded by family or friends. It was known. Right. And then all of a sudden, literally overnight, in the 9 or 10 hours it takes to fly from London to California, my entire world changed. Mm-hmm. And I had to reinvent myself because I had to relearn where I lived. And I recognized that something had fundamentally shifted in my life. And then, when I graduated high school, I did that in America. I recognized that something had shifted again. And I went back to England for a while. Mm-hmm. And then I was the lead singer in a band, several bands, musician. Yeah, I had my good old bad old days, and
what?
Yeah. And then I met somebody that I fell in love with. Actually, I fell back in love with them. They were somebody that I'd known earlier. And I went from being like the lead singer in a band one Friday night to being the dad of a 4-year-old the next day, because my partner at the time, it was a package deal, right? So they had a child already, and so like things shifted, and I just kept noticing these shifts. When I mentioned the story of the liquor store, right, and my life shifted when I was 27. I was not a particularly nice person. I was very entitled. I was, kind of your average, mediocre, angry white guy, and so the world was mine. That's kind of the way, unfortunately, it works. And I remember a moment where that shifted, where all of a sudden I realized, I actually can't go through life like that. Like, it's not healthy for me to go through life like that. It certainly wasn't fun for anyone who knew me to go through life like that. And so I began shifting. And honestly, it was out of that shift that my marriage dissolved. And later on, Phoenix and I got together, and my world changed. But I recognized there were these markers, but I didn't know what to call them.
Right.
And I didn't know what to do with them. And I didn't know why they were important to me. I just knew that they were. And then I began discovering rites of passage. And quite honestly, one of the places I discovered it, the works of Joseph Campbell, Hero with 1,000 Faces, is an amazing book. And just generally the works of Joe Campbell kind of led me to this idea that, we do go through these cycles.
When I think like having the awareness, like, something's shifting. I'm not the same person I was. Like, that's not that. I don't think the average person has that much self-awareness. That's kind of a big deal to recognize something is changing. And if we can have that awareness and pause and honor it and celebrate it and give it a little bit more space to exist, like, that's really powerful.
Incredibly, yeah. Well, and it harkens back again to both of your ideas about just being present. I mean, that we go through all of these changes, right? But then it's that acknowledgement of it that makes it that we recognize that sacred point in our lives. Yeah. Thank you. Speaking of books, so I don't have the hard copy. Leilani and I've had this discussion, but I have on my Kindle. Wait, can you see it? Let's see. There we go.
Hey.
There we go.
I'm not a Kindle reader. I'm a hard copy person, and she's very technologically advanced.
I'm audiobooks and Kindles because I want it when I want it, where I want it. So this way it's always with me. So in looking at your book, I'm going to say the full title for our listeners: Witches, Heretics, and Warrior Women, Ignite Your Rebel Spirit Through Magic and Ritual. I just love that title.
I do too.
Well, I'm glad you did. You have some really, really powerful female figures. I mean, there's like Joan of Arc and Mary Magdalene and complex figures, women who I wouldn't just say my opinion, but women who were kind of lightning rods for the thinking of their time and breaking through that and living through that and self-aware, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the questions I wanted to ask you about this was, how did you choose? So let me taking a step back. The one that I didn't know a whole lot about, and I loved the way you described her journey, was Harriet Tubman. I mean, I knew the facts, right? And all that kind of stuff, but I'm getting ready to choke up. I'm sorry. But that part about where she just kept going, she just kept, she just persevered, and she just, that was kind of her. I can't remember the exact words of the mantra, but, she was just putting one foot in front of the other, and she kept going throughout a whole bunch of garbage in her life. And so, and I love the warrior contemplation that you write, the ways that you sacralize their lives for people like me who can use them for inspiration. So I've digressed. Oh, the question was, how did you choose the women that out of all of the women in the world, how did you choose those?
Yeah, that was definitely the hardest part. There were clear women that I wanted to be included. Like Harriet Tubman was obvious, Marie Laveau was obvious, Boudica was obvious. Like those were ancestors, quote unquote, that I already felt like I had a relationship with. Mm-hmm. So I just, I just did a little research, and really it was like that word heretic. I was really focused on that word heretic and finding women that embodied that word and scared the shit out of the status quo and were just fighters and rebels. And so it took a minute, like Moving Robe Woman, I'd never heard of that person. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to make sure I was cross-cultural. I was including people of color, mm-hmm. that I was including Indigenous people. That was very important. So it was, there's one badass that didn't get included, and Sojourner Truth is one of like my heroes. I love that person mm-hmm. so much. She is an inspiration to me. So that's the one that didn't get in there because I was trying to make sure different cultures and whatnot was included. Mm-hmm.
But she's in every one of your books somewhere, right? Like she's usually in the acknowledgements.
Yeah, well, she
slides in. Yeah,
I sneak her in there because she's just such a freaking inspiration. But that was the hardest part, was winnowing it down to 9 mm-hmm. women. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of the 9 that did, make the cut, which one was the most meaningful for you, and why?
That's so hard.
I know, we asked the hard question.
I mean, different women for different reasons, but honestly, probably Harriet Tubman. Because I'm writing this book. It came out this year, but I wrote it over a year ago. So it's like on the heels of the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's on the heels of really seeing some social awareness, like seeing white people start to wake up and see like shit is not working. This is not okay. I was raised in an interracial household, so I feel like I have a different perspective culturally than some of my peers do. So that's probably, like, I knew a lot about Harriet Tubman, and there's a really good book that I can't remember the name of right now, but it's written by Witch Dr. Utu. I can't remember the name of the book, but it's all about honoring Harriet Tubman and working with her as an ancestor and her whole journey. Like a lot of the information I learned about her from more of a spiritual perspective came from his book. So it's a really great book.
Okay.
But yeah, like I just feel like she represents the epitome of being an American hero.
So much, so true.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
And just, yeah. And she thought outside of herself, but she also thought about her own survival. And that's, I constantly tell people about, put your own mask on first before, turning to your whatever.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So it sounds like maybe you should have like a sequel or something, or Witches 2 or something, because
I like that idea.
Actually, I see like an HBO Max series.
Totally. I have one of my students, so I do these goddess workshops, and one of my students was like, you should do like a drunk goddess, like the Drunk History TV show,
Drunk History, where
we talk about mythology and we just drink the whole time and tell the mythology. I'm into it.
Oh my gosh, like the Circe. Do you say Circe or Circe?
Yeah, Circe.
The Circe story. I mean, all of that. That's fabulous.
I wanted to go back to something, Phoenix, that you said as we kind of round out our time here. At the very beginning, you talked about going into ritual for the first time and being like, this is not how things go down when I'm practicing alone. And first of all, I want to give a shout out to that, because I think in my own personal journey with being a witch, I felt like there was something wrong with me, because I felt like a lot of emphasis was placed on a solitary practice. And that's just not the way I roll. And I have a lot of grace around that now. But back then I thought like I must be doing something wrong because things aren't working out for me as alone as they do whenever I practice in a circle. But that's kind of an aside. But my question is, for people who have been either disconnected from their circle or maybe have discovered things within them during our time apart with COVID and maybe are beginning to emerge, I would be interested if the two of you could offer your like some wise words or suggestions on how people can approach maybe a spiritual connection or spiritual awakening or a spiritual rite of passage as we all culturally emerge, but also individually emerge.
Yeah. So that word emerging is actually the key to that question, the key to the answer to that question. So in every rite of passage, there is a moment when it might start off with an idea, there might be companions, there might be community, but there comes a part when whoever it is that's going through the rite of passage has to take those last few steps by themselves. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's, the long dark night of the soul in some mythology. Sometimes it's you're the one that has to go and slay the dragon, right? You can think about this in different mythologies. It's the moment where you have to face death, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. It's the moment when everything is dark and bleak, and the only way you're going to get through it is if you get through it. Mm-hmm. And there are times when people don't get through it. Like, that's the thing to understand. Sometimes we don't get through the rite of passage. There are initiations that don't happen. There are things that don't complete because it's not the right time or it's not the right circumstance. Yeah. But it's that emerging. It's that moment that, for depending on where people are and how they've lived their lives, roughly speaking, for the last 2 years, we've been in this unprecedented time in our history. As human beings, none of us have ever gone through anything like COVID before. And now we potentially have learned something about ourselves. We've loved it. We've hated it. We've missed people. We've missed significant events. And now we have to take that next step. So if you've been doing this by yourself, whether that's your practice, it's time now to say, okay, the next step is to step back into life. The next step is to cautiously and carefully and intentionally take the step and go to that witchy pagan conference, go and meet that author, go and start that coven, reach out to my community and say, I'm willing to host the potluck this week, but only you can do that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the next step. So if you're waiting for somebody else to do it, yeah, it's all you, and it will never happen. You must make that step. So that's what I would say about emergence. That's an entire ritual, an emergence ritual.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think
maybe a series.
Mhm.
Yeah, totally. Like it's going to take a minute to get back into the swing of things. It's going, it's going to take a minute to, like, I still don't feel safe out in the world. It's going to take a minute. So I think that it is a series of awareness and awakenings and stepping into. And the last 2 years, I transitioned everything I was doing online, like everybody. So I have this whole cadre of students that have been doing everything witchcraft related online, that came into the witchcraft world, and the only access they had was Zoom classes or, doing things online. And I'm hearing from so many people right now, like, okay, now what? What's next? Like, I'm ready. I need people. And I saw, we've been in an incubator for the last 2 years, and it's been good and it's been terrible. And it's been interesting and curious, all of those things. And if you can look at what has been good and bad in your personal incubator for the last 2 years, well, now it's time, like Gwion says, the emergence, right? Now it's time to take what you've learned, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and join community. Like, I was a solitary for a decade before I got involved with other people. And I grew and learned and transformed exponentially more when I got involved with community than I did as a solitary. Being a solitary is totally legit. I'm not saying, like, if you're a solitary, you're not doing enough. That's not it. Being a solitary is amazing and important, but community pushes your edges. Community gives you access to more than just yourself. That we learn more when we have other people to bounce our ideas off of. So I think that, and I feel this in my gut, like my heart, my soul, things are shifting now. I haven't felt this for a couple of years, but I feel it now. Like, I believe and trust, like the emergence is real this time, knock on wood. So I feel like, exactly like Gwion said, this is the opportunity to find those people, to be brave, to be bold, if you want a thing, then start the thing. I think that this is the opportunity. It's a big, the next few months is a big moment to level up our witchcraft. Yeah.
So speaking of starting the thing, so first off, let me just give a little background to the question that I'm going to ask for our listeners. Both Phoenix and Gwion are like, when they say that they're authors, they're like authors. Go to Amazon and look up Phoenix LaFae and Gwion Raven and just see the breadth of information that's out there, books that they have out there. And I'm just going to put in a plug for the magic of food, because I'm just going to say, I made your warm figs recipe. Oh my freaking God. Oh my. I am like I'm trying to, this drool coming out of my mouth right now. But anyway, so that's one of the many books, one of the many books that they have out there. And but so you were out there, you were outside of yourselves, and you were sharing with the world already. So my question is, while you were already doing that, why did you decide to then have a podcast? I mean, putting in a plug for with the Witches Next Door, fabulous. Why did you decide that was your next step?
Well, I'm going to tell you like an esoteric reason, and then I'm going to tell you the real reason. No,
this will be interesting.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? We both like writing, and we do it a lot, both from a witchy standpoint of view and for like in our regular lives, right? There's a lot that we have to write. And because of COVID, we wanted to have conversations. And so I thought it was important that people got to hear, like, they can read our words and you get to learn about us, in the books. I think we're very frank and open about our lives and some of the things that happened in our lives in all the books we've written. But there's something about, like, we literally do those podcasts around our kitchen table. We do those with nearly always some a glass of wine or bubble water. Like there's always something, right? And we sit around and we have a little drink and we have a little nibble and then we chat. And sometimes we know what we're going to talk about and sometimes we don't.
I don't ever know what we're going to talk
Pretty
about.
much. I just spring the topics on Phoenix. But to be clear, and I say this a lot of times, the reason is I'll say, what do you want to do a podcast about? And Phoenix says, I don't know. So I say, fine. So then I come up with an idea and then Phoenix says, I had no idea we were going to talk about that. I was like, well, you should have said. But anyway, it's just the two of us chatting. I thought that was because we couldn't connect with people face to face, because somebody couldn't read our book or a blog and then come and meet us somewhere and say, what about this? I thought it was important that we had a conversation. And I loved the fact that there's that. The other reason, and if anybody at Llewellyn, our publisher, is listening to this, we get so many requests to have our books put on Audible or some other platform. And I love Llewellyn as a publisher. They are great. And they retain the right to publish our audio books. That's part of the contract. And they haven't published our books yet.
I know, I've looked
on Audible. So get off the fucking dot and do it. My God. So we thought, well, if they're not going to do it, then we're going to put it out there. We'll put our voices out there. Plus, it also means I get at least an hour to chat with Phoenix. Most of the time she ignores me. But so that's why we started a podcast.
I know. I do love how you wind her up though for a rant or something. I love your chemistry there.
Phoenix has a lot of ranty, soapboxy things to talk about, and I love it. I love it when she goes on a rant.
I know, you just feed her. You say, "Oh yeah, did you think about this?" And it's like,
and now it gives us a good excuse to invite other people onto our podcast, into our own little bit of weirdness, you know. So that'll be good. We're going to do like one of those weird, like Buffy Angel crossover episodes, and have you on our podcast, right? So for anybody listening right now to this podcast, this is the bit. This is the little secret message that you have to take, and then go listen to our podcast.
And it'll be our first time being interviewed. Right.
So
we're always.
Here's the phrase that will make no sense unless you listen to the other podcast.
Right, like the secret part on the recording, right? You know,
acro yoga. Today's word is acro yoga.
Yes. So, before we bring it on home, is there something that we didn't ask that you would like everyone to know that you wish we had asked?
Yeah, Phoenix, what soapbox do you want to step on? Go.
Maybon. No, just.
Oh, jeez.
Don't get me started. Oh my gosh, I teach this class I call it the Intro to Witchcraft class, and I do a Wheel of the Year chat where we go through all the holidays, and every time I warn people, when we get to Mabon, to Maybon, to the autumn equinox, I'm going to go off, and you just need to know that now.
Just know.
Yeah, I think we're good. I think I think that, there was one question that you said is, what's the intersectionality between our faith and like our mission or our cause in life? I like that as a question. I don't know that I have an answer for it. Phoenix, I have a question for you. What is the intersectionality between your faith and your mission, passion, or cause in life?
This is hilarious. So witches, we don't proselytize, we don't convert. We're not out there preaching the gospel and convincing people to be witches. And yet, it doesn't take long to have a conversation with someone who's curious to all of a sudden have them attending a public ritual or going to a witch camp or going to a class about witchcraft. So I think that there is a way that my faith and my religion is witchcraft, right? So I know that that's not true for everyone that practices witchcraft, but for me it is. So I think that there is this crossover there is this secret desire. There is this little mission I have to expand people's minds and bring more folks into the fold of witchcraft and paganism.
Oh, my children,
we have warmed figs. Come, we have warmed figs.
Warm figs.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And
And I mean, that means you're still going to the Baptist church, but you're also going to the forest and honoring the trees. Then we've done it. Our mission accomplished. Yeah.
Why got to be Baptists?
I don't know. It's the first thing that popped into my head.
Don't pick on the Baptist. No.
Yeah.
So what about you, Gwion?
Oh man. So, there's a phrase came from a popular movie a few years ago, right? Live deliciously. That's it, man. That's it in a nutshell for me. Live deliciously. Look, if we're exceedingly lucky, we get 80 years on this planet, right? Maybe some of us get a little more, some of us get a little less, but 80 years. Just like drink it, cook it, slather yourself in it, make love to it, run away and just enjoy it. If somebody says to you, oh, I wish when I was 20, I'd run away and join the circus. It's like, well, it's not too late to go and run away. I got married to the most incredible woman in the world when I was 40. I wrote my first book when I was a bit older than that. Everything in the books that I've written and the books that I'm writing and my practice is like, there's nothing wrong with planning for the future. There's nothing wrong with being responsible. We should all do those things. That's a big part of witchcraft, is being responsible, I think. Yeah. But also live deliciously. Eat warm figs on a Tuesday afternoon because you can. Drink champagne on a Friday night because why the F not? Just do it, whatever it is for you. So that's it for me. I just want people to live deliciously.
That's brilliant. I think that, it's like, bam, drop the mic. That was.
Yeah, that says it all.
Thank you both so very much. I knew this would be wonderful, and of course it is. But I didn't realize how much it would just allow me to just kind of sink into your energy and absorb some of your ideas and takes and give me a lot to think about. So thank you so very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for helping me live deliciously whenever we're in your presence at Ritual, and for this interview time too. It's just the richness that you both have given to my spiritual practice and my life is infinite. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now I know when Leilani comes over to for our recording, I'm going to have some champagne and warmed figs. So
there you go.
Always.
We hope you have enjoyed the magic that has unfolded here at Witchy Wit.
It would be great if you would help make Witchy Wit possible and get access to exclusive content by donating on Patreon.
We'd love it if you join our Witchy community and enjoy shareable content on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Would you do us a big favor and support us by rating and reviewing us wherever you get your podcasts? It's free and helps witchy folks find us.
Feel free to email us at witchywitpodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from our community. Reach out and let us know what's brewing in your cauldron.
New episodes are released every second and fourth Friday. Follow us on your favorite podcasting platform so our episodes go right to your playlist. You can listen as you ride your broom.
Stay witchy, y'all!